Hi, today we're going to start constructing an 8x13 layout, and we're going to start this process by first printing the layout at full scale. That's a 1-to-1 print that's coming off my printer right here. So it is exactly the same size as you would see in real life. The lines are 6 inches apart, and that's going to be important in just a second. So now we're in my garage. I've got it laid out on the floor. Keep in mind this is just the base layer, so anything that is 0 level, so there's no ramps on this. And I'm going ahead and I've marked all of my individual modules, and now I'm going to start cutting the paper to eliminate all of the stuff I don't need. And then once I get this done, I'm going to start taping the individual components together. Now I'm doing this for a couple of reasons. One is it makes it easier for me to work with, especially by myself. The second reason is I want to make sure that everything stays lined up. So here now you can see I've got my tape measure laid out, and these Milwaukee tape measures are actually really nice because they stick out, they stay, they're accurate, you don't have to fiddle with them. So you'll see that I went ahead and I taped the first seam, and I made a mistake, so I cut it back and then retaped it in the correct spot. Now here on the far side, I'm doing the same thing again. This time I've got the tape measure spread out a little further. Makes it a little easier to make sure you're doing accurate measuring. And here in just a second, we're going to get going on building the curved benchwork. Now I get a lot of questions about curved benchwork, especially at train shows, and most people just think it's steam bent, but it's actually glue laminated. So the material I use is actually called Luan. You can get it at Home Depot of all places. So it's a 1/4 inch flooring material specifically made for protecting floors when people are doing construction. So it's not the same stuff they use to protect hardwood floors. In this particular case, what you're seeing right now is actually a different product. It's called bending plywood. This is 1/8 inch stuff. They'll actually bend down to a 4-inch radius, which is kind of crazy to think about. But the idea here is I'm using the super flexible stuff because it's allowing me to put my little risers in the correct spot. So I want to make sure that I have smooth transitions. So with the paper, I can only get kind of a rough idea. So once I get a couple pieces in, I'll go ahead and fill it in. So now here I'm switching things up, and I'm actually moving on to the second piece of curved benchwork. So I'm using 1 sheet of plywood to screw all these little risers on, and they're 4 inches tall. And then the material that I'm going to be gluing together in front of it is actually 3 7/8. So that makes the best use of the plywood sheets when I'm ripping it into strips, and then also gives me a little bit of extra when I'm actually ripping it down to final size once all the stuff is glued together and it's set up. So I got the first one done, and I'm moving on to the second one. You can see that it's a really tight radius there. That's actually only about 14 or 16 inches across end from end. So in this particular layout, obviously it's not ideal. You want something bigger, but this layout was a big resizing of a much larger layout. So the original track plan is actually from Model Railroader. And if I recall, it was actually in the neighborhood of 12 by 20 was the original sizing. So I got this shrunk down quite a bit for this gentleman. But in order to do that, I do have to make some concessions, and one of those was shrinking down that access point. So obviously we still want to keep that access point, but we want to make it as big as we can. So now what we've done, and I've fast forwarded a little bit here, is I've taken that same bendy material that I was using before, and I stretched it around the framing just to see how long of a piece I actually needed. I cut the second piece to size, and now as I'm building this and gluing it together in the individual layers, and I'm using Titebond 2 here, so nothing fancy, same stuff you can get at Home Depot, I'm going ahead and gluing together all of the individual layers. So with this super bendy bending plywood, it's actually about an 1/8 inch thick, so I'm actually gluing together 6 layers here. And as trying to do this by yourself, it's super it's a pain in the butt, to be completely honest. But here now we've got, and we're going ahead and putting clamps all the way across, and Yes, I do own a lot of clamps. I got these in a Home Depot sale a couple years ago, and I've got about 200 of them. And believe it or not, I actually run out. So 24 hours later, I let the glue set up for 24 hours always. You can do it for 12, but I personally find that the extra couple hours helps set it up a little harder. Using a little block plane, this is where I went ahead and I shave off all the extra glue, make sure I've got a nice flat spot. So when I'm running it through the table saw, and here I'm just ripping off just enough to make the other side smooth. So typically when you're doing a glue up, the boards don't line up perfectly. This is a great way to get that done. So you go ahead and rip off that one side, wait for the table saw to shut off, and then I've got a little aluminum block set to 3.5 inches, so I go ahead and set my saw with that, and then I rip down both pieces. So that concludes today's project. So if you like this video and you'd like to see more, please like and subscribe. It doesn't mean much to you, but it's a huge deal for me. Thanks for watching.